offseason is in full effect, so it's time to get trivial. Top 10 players at each position, and we're starting with the point guards. And boy, was this very, very interesting. Coming in at number 10, we have Tyrese Maxey. Maxey this season exploded on the scene this year, picked off where he left off last season, and probably even picked up a bit more offensive responsibility than a lot of people originally anticipated. To give you a little bit of backstory, James Harden early in the season had a feud with Daryl Morey really in last year's offseason that kind of carried over into the beginning part of the year, and because of that, he wasn't going to play for the Sixers. He eventually got shipped off to the Philadelphia 76ers, and in return, Philly just received a bunch of players that had to depend on somebody else creating opportunities for them, and Maxey, of course, was going to have to be that now as a primary ball handler with James Harden no longer there. And to add even more responsibility to his workload, Joel Embiid, who was playing at a ridiculous level in the middle of the season, took a spill, got injured, Kuminga landed on his leg, which then resulted in him being sidelined for basically half of the year, which really and truly was very damning for the Philadelphia 76ers. But Maxey, surprisingly, still flourished in this new responsibility, new role, even though his second best offensive player more than likely was like, what, Tobias Harris or Kelly Oubre? That's a yikes. And in all honesty, that is a huge reason why I just really value what Maxey did this year. I could even go a little bit higher, but the things that he was able to do during the regular season, weathering the storm, still producing some wins on a team that just wasn't that good at all, really showed the level of maturity as a ball handler, passer, and playmaker that I was not anticipating. A scorer, I knew Maxey could get it. He can go get a bucket. I saw a lot of that last season. His first step, his burst off ball was something unbelievable. And again, a lot of that carried over to this season. But if you told me by the end of the year that Maxey was going to give you 25, 26 points, 6 assists, 3 to 4 rebounds, and shooting splits of 45, 37, and 87, where half of the season Joel Embiid is not available and having to pick up even more responsibility because of the absence of James Harden and no other real consistent ball handler surrounding him to kind of aid him in that capacity, I don't think anybody would ever anticipate it. And the fact that he played at that level really speaks volumes to who he has become as a player. Now, coming at number 9, got Damian Lillard, man. Now, Dame, man, this right here, what a roller coaster of a season for Dame. Dame this year came into the year, very high expectations. His first year in Milwaukee, playing alongside an all-time great player in Giannis. First time he's been the second option since his days with LaMarcus Aldridge. And because he was going to be a bit more complimentary, I think a lot of people anticipated that he was going to look significantly better than what he normally does. But unfortunately, it went the opposite direction. And the player who normally finishes like top 5 on these lists, unfortunately finds himself on the bottom half of the top 10, but still very, very productive this season. He finished the year off averaging 24 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. Shooting splits is what really took a massive hit. 42% from the field, 35% from behind the arc, and 92% from the free throw line. There was a stretch during the season early on where Dame just could not find a shot at all. Like, he just wasn't making the shots. It looks really, really bad. And when you compound that with the defense that he also is not providing, even when you have Brook Lopez and Giannis surrounding you, yeah, it looks really, really bad for Dame throughout a good portion of the season. However, to be fair to Dame, when Giannis wasn't on the floor, he looked really comfortable. He looked significantly better. And what I think that really shows me is that he just needs more reps being a more complementary piece alongside Giannis. The passing, the ball handling, the decision making is still there. And for me, that was the separator between him and Maxey. The bucket getting, the scoring, I think that's a bit closer than people may want to give credit to, even when Dame struggled this year. But the separator is definitely the ball handling, the decision making, the drawing a defense, and being able to handle double teams a bit better, that pressure a bit better than Maxey. That is a separator for me, but definitely close, and something that I hope that Dame is able to adjust to and fix in his upcoming season so we can get a better version of him, because this year is undeniably one of his worst years yet. Up next, we have De'Aaron Fox. Despite the fact that Fox did not finish on an all-star team nor all-NBA, and in my opinion, I think that is more of a depiction of how talented the position is in this league, or how much talent there is in today's game, rather than how bad Fox is. De'Aaron Fox put together a pretty impressive season this year and was fairly similar to what we saw from him in previous years outside of the 2023 campaign, because that year D-Fox was in particularly great finishing at the basket. This year it took a step back and was slightly closer to what he was in previous years, but nevertheless D-Fox still hooping 26, 27 points, 5 to 6 assists, shooting splits of 46.5, 37, and 74%, and that 3-point shooting and the volume as well is what has kind of put him in this conversation of being a slightly better player than I think a lot of people give him credit for. The 3-point shooting at times was a bit shaky, to be fair, throughout the year, because he just wasn't hitting the 3-point shots that he should have been making, at least at that volume, and the shot selection was certainly concerning when they were not falling, especially coming from a player that was coming off of a really great, and if I'm not mistaken, I think like borderline historic finishing season around the basket. To take a step back from that is pretty concerning. The three-point shooting certainly didn't suffice to that level of efficiency of scoring, and because of that, the efficiency did start to drop a little bit, but a lot of the other value that he provided was still there, in particular with his passing and playmaking. So far, I do believe that all three of these players are relatively close in the same tier, so it's not a significant gap between neither one of them, despite the fact that, you know, these are three different players. And right after that, we have Tyrese Halliburton. Now, Hallie, it was really, really hard for me to gauge Hallie this year, and I think everyone knows why that is the case. Halliburton came out this year, and he was firing on all cylinders. It was actually pretty impressive on how great Halliburton was performing in the first 30 games of the season for himself. 25 points, 12 to 13 assists, 4 rebounds, get this, shooting splits of 50, 41, 86, and only turning the ball over 2.5 games. Undeniably, he was looking like what many people would assume Steve Nash would look like in today's game. Like, that's what he was doing. The ball handling was there, the passing was there. I think the decision making isn't as good as Steve Nash. The handling of ball pressure wasn't as good as Steve Nash either. The probing wasn't as good as Steve Nash. I'm not saying he's as good as Steve Nash, but the numbers, the production, and how that was translating into what the team was producing offensively, bro, it was crazy. I don't really, it was ridiculous. But unfortunately, got injured in the middle of the season, and for the last like 30 games of the year, didn't look the same, and then went in the postseason and was fairly inconsistent, wasn't as aggressive as he once was in the early stages of the year, which really hurt him and the offense as well. And then when you combine that with the poor shooting and then the egregious defense, because I think he's like the worst or second worst defender on this list, maybe third, because Dame and Trae Young are up there as well. But in the conversation of being like a very clear negative defender, it really did hurt his value. In 30 games, it's just not enough for me to put him higher on this list. If he gives me another season, then I can see him jumping over quite a few players on this list pretty easily. And actually, another player that is very similar in that vein is who I have next up. And at number 6, I have Trae Young. Very, very, very similar concerns of who this player is. Started off the season very slow, missed a huge chunk of basketball, but after the first, I want to say like 20 games in the regular season, really picked it up and had a stretch of basketball that was on par with really any other great all-time offensive engine that you can think of at the point guard position. With Trae, between like November 21st to around February 5th, which is roughly around a 35 game sample size, he was averaging 28.5 points, 11 assists, a steal. Turnovers were much more than Hallie, 4.5 a game nearly, but shooting splits 46, 41, 85. That three-point shooting is what a lot of people have emphasized when it comes to his style of play and who he is as a player, because of course we want to see him make those shots a bit more consistently. Over the past couple of years, has not been falling at the same level, and you could very well argue throughout his entire career, he has not been the most consistent three-point shooter, despite the fact the volume is there at levels in which it maybe should not be. And of course, him as a negative defender certainly hurts him in that aspect as well. But because of this near 35 game sample size, I can put him in very similar conversations with Hallie. Perfect offensive engine, ball handler, passer, distributor. I think a much more aggressive scorer than Halliburton. Because of that, he does bend the defense a bit more than Hallie as well. He's way more controlled and poised when it comes to handling the ball, initiating the offense, taking on pressure and double teams, something that he does better than Halliburton as well. And I do just believe he's a better passer and playmaker than Hallie also, which then kind of brings into conversation to why I have him over him. Furthermore, I do believe that just undeniably he was on the worst team. I live in Atlanta. I watch probably more Hawks games than I would like to admit. Bro, Clint Capella, his finishing is cooked. It's cooked. Like the brother can't handle the ball anymore. He's throwing hook shots that are like airball. It's crazy. He just can't do anymore. Bro, I'm pretty sure as Hawk fans, y'all know, any of my Hawk fans out there, bro, there's moments where Trae Young is spoon feeding this man Clint Capella buckets, and he's still not able to like convert on him. It was frustrating. I'm not even a Hawks fan. But again, very short sample size of both of these players playing at astronomical levels, and it's really hard to determine if that's who they really are, or are these just like really, really great stretches throughout a really good year that could potentially put them higher or lower on the list in the next upcoming season. Now, coming at number 5, and I may get some flack for this because he really didn't play this season, but I do believe a lot of people are forgetting who he is as a player. Definitely, his name just isn't in the ether as much as it should be, and I'm pretty sure many people know Ja Morant. Ja, again, can't really speak too much about what he did this last season because he didn't really play. He was suspended entering this season, then got injured after coming back for a handful of games and just didn't play again. But Ja, bro, I think think people tend to forget, and very similar to the last two players that I just listed off, Value is more offensive oriented, does a lot of playmaking, not as good as a passer as the other two whatsoever, but his ability to get to the basket, put pressure on the rim, shift the defense, rotate them, force them to give him a bit more attention than a lot of these other players, while being on a team that is offensively inept outside of Desmond Bane. I do believe that Ja Morant should get a bit more consideration about who he is as a player. If that three-point shot is falling the way that it did for a couple of these games, again, very small sample size, but if the shot is falling, the mid-range shot is falling as well, with the finishing at the basket that I think we all believe he's going to receive, he's going to be very clear of Tyrese Halliburton and Trae Young, in my opinion, especially if they perform very similar to what we saw from them in this year. But what isn't hypothetical is the next player and what he did this season, and that's Jalen Brunson. Shout out to Brunson, bro. I'm actually very impressed on what Brunson just provided to us this season. Started his career in Dallas, running mate with Luka Doncic, then got the opportunity to pivot and be more of a contributor offensively with the New York Knicks. And this season, with Julius Randle going down, only playing about half the season, Randle only played like 46 games. The last game he played was January 27th, which didn't allow Brunson to pick up a bit more offensive responsibility. Not even a bit more, just a lot more offensive responsibility. It looked very, very impressive. Again, after Julius Randle went down the last 34 games of the season, Brunson was averaging 31.5 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, shooting splits of 48%, 37%, and 86% from the charity stripe. Defensively, again, in the same ballpark with the other players beneath him. He's not going to give you much on the defensive side of the floor, but on a team that isn't as offensively talented, especially as the Indiana Pacers, who has to overly depend and rely on what Brunson can create for them, bro, he exceeded everyone's expectations by an astronomical margin, and I'm actually very impressed on what he did this season. Not the same passer as Hallie or Trae Young, undeniably, but a much more consistent scorer, and certainly was able to weather the storm of elite level defenses in the postseason much better than what we've seen from Trae Young throughout his postseason career. Unfortunately, Halliburton was injured, so I don't want to give him too much flack for this postseason run, but in the playoffs, the things that Brunson did this postseason run, 32 points, 7.5 assists, 3 rebounds, 44% from the field, 31% from behind the arc, which is a noticeable regression, but be very mindful. He was playing on a team where he was getting double teamed, he was getting all the attention. There was no other shot creator around him because he was playing with Anunoby, sometimes not even Anunoby because he was in and out, Dante, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson. When he was there, he was basically just playing with a bunch of play finishers. Nobody else could really put the ball on the floor and create their own shot, shift the defense. It was all on Brunson. Now, top 3. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I don't care. Number 3, Steph Curry. Now, Curry, I think that, in all honesty, kind of speaks for himself. I don't really think I have to do that much explaining when it comes to Curry. He was, again, one of the better players in the NBA, in my opinion, top 10 this past season. 26 points, 5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, shooting splits of 45, 41, 92. He was sensational. He was great. He was amazing, hyper efficient. He was really, really great. But unfortunately, towards the tail end of the year, the age, the wear and tear, and just the overall responsibility of having to anchor this offense really started to catch up to him, and the shooting splits really started to teeter a little bit. The creation wasn't there as well. Down the stretch of a lot of these games, he had to weather the storm. He had to pick up a lot of that responsibility. It's the reason why he won Clutch Player of the Year. But towards the tail end of the season, he just was not the same player. He was not as impactful because the shooting splits were not there. But I do believe for some people who are his critics after this past season, it's a bit unfair to be ultra harsh on Curry because he had to carry so much offensive load. But even when he carried it, I do believe he was a better offensive weapon than everybody I've named below him because of the accuracy. And struggling shooting for Curry basically means he's just not shooting 40% from behind the arc. Now he's shooting like 38, 37, which is still better than everyone else. But also more importantly, bro, the 2 players who were ahead of him, they were just also crazy. And that's why in number 2, I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. SGA, runner-up in the MVP race, 36, 5.5, shooting splits of 53.5% from the field, which is crazy when you take into consideration how many mid-range jump shots that he took this year. But we'll get to that later on. 35% from behind the arc, an improvement that a lot of people were anticipating. In particular, the defense, however, is what further kind of separates him from a lot of other players on this list. You could very well argue that he is the best defender on this list, and that also aided his value and why I believe he's just much more impactful. But of course, a lot of his value was on the offensive side of the floor. And again, like I said it before, the amount of mid-range jump shot shooting that we saw from him was just unheard of. It was unconscious how accurate he was in this range. That in between in-between game is ridiculous. And when you're making it at that level, it just makes it almost impossible to defend someone like that. Add on top of that, the defensive responsibility he had as well. And also the thing that really improved, in my opinion, for Shai was his passing. His passing and playmaking, being able to leverage his ability as a scorer to get open opportunities for his teammates, as well as just the fact that his teammates got better, adding Chet, J-Dub got better as well, Lou Dort start making his shots. But being able to create quality looks for his teammates and capitalizing on the attention that he received, that is another huge testament to how much of an improved player he has been over the years. And that is something that, again, many people have been looking for. But number one is Luka Doncic. I don't really think I have to go into that much explanation behind it at all. Luka is Luka. 34 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds, 48 to 49% from the field, 38% from behind the arc, and 78, almost 79% from the charity stripe. Again, don't think I have to go in that much explanation. Scoring was elite, rebounding was there, passing and facilitating. I think he is the best passer and playmaker on this list, and I do believe that. I don't think there is a better passer and playmaker that can leverage his scoring ability on this list better than Luka, especially when he's on ball. And I just think in a general sense, outside of like really Jokic, I don't think there's a better passer and playmaker in the NBA, point blank period. I think he's in the conversation to be the best one as well. And this year really was able to put that on display. It was moments in which he was legitimately unguardable. He had stretches where it was really, really hard to keep up with what he was doing. And of course, the defensive woes were there, but this Dallas Mavericks team, they were able to really hide him accordingly, especially when they made the trade mid-season, brought in a bit more defenders, and he looked significantly better because he was able to rest on that side of the floor, as well as having a running mate in Kyrie that was also able to take a lot of that load off of him. Not 100% healthy in the postseason, so I'm going to give him a break on that. But what he did for the 70 games he played, I believe that he not only had a conversation of being the best point guard in the NBA, but potentially the best player in the NBA as well. And Luka was just amazing. One of the greatest offensive seasons we've ever seen, and I don't want people to overlook that at all. He not only led the league in scoring, but those shooting splits translated to a true shooting percentage of nearly 62%. It was crazy. So that's the list. Not too many surprises in my opinion, I don't believe. If you believe I'm missing someone, hold your horses, just wait, because I might have him listed as a shooting guard. So just wait until that video. But until then, make sure you subscribe button, notification bell, especially if you want to be updated when I go through the rest of the positions. And until then, I'll see you later. Peace.